Welcome to Viewpoint. My name is Diane Doddridge, and I'll be your host today as we interview the curator of the Stanislaus River Museum. Hello, Mr. Blake.
Hello, Diane. How are you?
Good.
Please have a seat.
We're going to speak with Mr. Martin Blake, who was one of the originators of this museum. And I'm pleased to be here, Marty.
So nice.
I hope you don't mind if I call you Marty.
That's fine.
I want you to tell us, and we'll also view some of the pictures as we go, tell us a little bit about how this museum originated.
Well, this museum originated in June 2010. So this is the third anniversary that we've been located here at 68 North Washington Street in Sonora, California.
Right on the main street. Can't miss it.
Right on the main street. And I had moved up to the Mother Lode in 1976 and suddenly became aware of the controversies about rivers, especially the Stanislaus River. And having had my background in filmmaking from the University of Southern California, I realized that this could be a very important controversy to document, because it seemed to me like it was a microcosm of both state, national, and even world issues pertaining to rivers and the conservation of water in general.
And the allocation of water, that's
And the
another
allocation
thing.
of water, how it's allocated.
Very
is, of course,
controversial.
key. And so I began my documentation, and I worked with extremely talented photographers and writers and poets, such as a very close associate of mine, Ron Pickup, and we have put on shows at various visitor centers and shows here as well. And that's kind of how this museum itself got started.
So what is your purpose for having this?
Okay, the purpose is basically fourfold. One is to allow people to remember what the Stanislaus River was. Its beauty, its biodiversity, its riparian habitat, its whitewater rapids, its recreational possibilities, the love that so many of us had for this river. The second purpose is to remember and honor those who gave so much in the fight to try and save this river. So many unique things happened there that I think it's so important to remember and honor these people.
Could I stop you for just one moment? When you speak of saving the river, there's still a river there. It's been saved, but that's not what you mean. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, the Stanislaus River right now does still flow, but it flows under New Melones Reservoir. It basically has 2.4 million acre-feet of water that's going to allow it to be filled totally. It's probably now at about 1.8 million acre-feet and dropping.
And that is for the purpose of, why did this dam why was it built, which flooded so much of the Stanislaus?
Well, it was built for power, for a different type of recreation, motorboating and houseboating rather than whitewater rafting. It was built for flood control, and it was built to help flush out the delta. And local agencies were able to get some reduced power from the reservoir, although now Tuolumne County was given 9,000 acre-feet of its water, but I've recently found out that the federal government is pulling back on that, so we won't be getting that water that was allocated to us.
There is water allocated for farming, right?
Well, there's water that's been allocated to two Central Valley water districts. The Oakdale and the South San Joaquin water districts get over 100,000 acre-feet of water. But they're taking this water, Diane, and selling it down to Kern County, to the big agribusiness of Kern County, and making a huge profit on it, on water that we give to them virtually free. They not only take that free water, they then send it and sell it and make a double profit on the taxpayer.
I see. So go ahead now with your purposes.
All right. The third purpose for the museum is to look at the lessons that we've learned from the Stanislaus River struggle. And these lessons involve water politics, water economics, and water technology. And they all play a role in the building of dams. And all these lessons lead to part 4 of the museum, and its purpose here is to try and use these lessons to save other rivers. And we've been successful in saving the Tuolumne River and the Clavey River, possibly the San Joaquin River, but rivers everywhere, whether they be wild or not, are under attack for development. And the Merced, the McElmy River, these still all need to be saved, as well as the American River, kept from having dams built on it.
Water is such a contentious issue. It's so vital. We cannot live without it, and I can see why it's contentious. And the Stanislaus played a vital role in that. So I wonder, have you anything more to add about, before we begin our little perusal of all these wonderful pictures?
Yes, I do actually, thank you. I have a little book here that certain patrons sign in and make a comment when they come in. And if I may take a drink for a moment. I'd like to read to you a few of these comments, if I may, because it sort of tells what the effect of this museum is on the people who come here. And by the way, the people who come here are people who lived through the struggle of the 1979, 1980, and want to see it all again. There's people who've lived here and have forgotten about it all and want to see it again.
I was here also. I'm in some of these pictures. So.
Yes, yes you are.
Yes,
yes,
it's strong in my memory.
Yes. And there are new people who've come here over the last 30 years and know nothing about what has occurred here. And there's a group of just tourists who come in here and love to know about the history of the Mother Lode. So those are the 4 groups that...
you want to read 2 or 3 of those, and then we'll
yes.
start looking at some
yes.
of these great pictures.
One person says, I was baptized in this river, says James Fuller. The battle for the Stanislaus set the tone for no more large dams destroying our rivers and streams, and indicated that we need to conserve our water so such disasters no longer occur in our state. This is Evan Collins. The students loved it. It was a great experience. They were inspired by it. That's Tom Heist from local Columbia College, who brought his forestry and natural resource class here to view what we had here.
That's a good point. It's a great place for classes.
It is. A friend of mine, Dave Thorpe, came by and told me, after work I'd get an in or two, grab a 6-pack and my fishing pole, and go down to the Stanislaus at Parrots Ferry. I thought I was Tom Sawyer. That's what this area meant to these people. One last thing. Actually, 2 last comments. To know that you understand my pain means so much to me. I told my mom as she was dying, someday I'll meet you at the river in heaven. She knew I was talking about the Stanislaus. And that's from Cody Austin. And one last comment by photographer Jeff Nixon. Whenever I cross the reservoir, I can still hear the Stanislaus River flowing.
Very poetic. Lots of emotion there.
Yes, it meant a lot to people,
It did.
and this museum tends to bring those emotions to the surface.
Before we continue looking at some of your archival pictures and articles here, Marty, I just wanted to say that many people don't realize, and if I'm wrong in my data, please let me know, that I have heard that there are 14 dams on the Stanislaus alone. Is that so?
Yes, there's dams.
Varying sizes.
Yes, there's dams all over the Central Valley. And while dams do serve a benefit and do serve a value, there are so many of them, and pristine river canyons that mean so much to people on an academic and emotional level are so few. And I think there's ways, if we conserve water, if we suggest a big agriculture, which uses 80% of all water in the state of California, if they truly adopted conservation measures, dams would not be necessary. And drip irrigation is the key for big agriculture to conserve water.
I understand that some of them are instituting that, so
Yes, some
maybe
of
there's a
them are.
hope.
Yes, they're right. I think,
As water gets more scarce, maybe they'll be forced to do that,
yes.
if nothing else.
And one thing you learn is that in the end, environmentalists and farmers have more in common than not in common.
That's right. All right, what we're going to do now, you have your archival works here in phases, and I'd like to have you explain the different phases, if you would, please. And the journey begins.
Yes. The structure of the museum is a bit like a trip down the Stanislaus River itself. And we begin the journey with an exhibit of a photography, poetry, recreation of a trip down the Stanislaus River. And this was put together by Ron Pickupo from the years 1972 to 1979, and recreates a river trip down the Stanislaus using his award-winning photography and award-winning poetry.
Now, this was before it was flooded.
This is before it
I
was
see.
flooded. Yes, exactly. And I would want to read just from one panel, just to give you a sense of it. He names 3 rapids: Cadillac Charlie, ornate and grand; Death Rock, he brought kayakers home; Devil's Staircase, River Rockway. Then a wonderful picture of the Whitewater, and Ron says, "Too fast, too late to fear its white flashing wall, or feel its icy drench through useless clothing. No time to consider, only embrace. Become the energy surging the gorge, reaching further into the white-brown layers of ancient sea life."
Beautiful.
Welcome to a trip down the Stanislaus. Here we have a photograph by photographer Jeff Nixon of the old Pendola Ranch complex at the town of Old Melones, and it was the main agricultural center for Melones. And an individual named Richard Anderson came in, and he got permission to actually dismantle that ranching complex, which he did here. We see his merry band of dismantlers dismantling the ranch. That's the way it looked. And there it is, dismantled. And here we see the reservoir coming over and covering everything up. Yet Mr. Anderson was able to save all this historic redwood and build his own ranching complex called New Pendola in the nearby town of Calaveritas. And here's what the ranch looks like today. So that is one thing that was saved. Also saved were these fig bitters bottles, which the archaeology company found when they came in to do final mitigation work in the Stanislaus River Canyon. Of course, what was lost were all these wonderful petroglyphs Indian rock writing go back 10,000 years. And here is another example of the historic petroglyphs, rock writings. This one was at Horseshoe Bend, a photograph by Ron Pickup that was lost. Okay, one other thing that was saved was this timepiece creation, this time capsule sculpture that was created by Columbia College instructor Richard Close, leaving a message to future generations. This capsule, this ceramic capsule, was placed in the Stanislaus River Canyon and was, of course, it was inundated by the reservoir. And 200 years from now, when the reservoir goes down, this capsule will be found with messages from people today to future generations, connecting the past, the present, and the future. As a final part of this presentation, I would like to introduce Mr. Ron Pickup, an award-winning photographer and poet, a person with whom I've done many shows about the Stanislaus, who's going to read some of his poetry to you to talk about what the Stanislaus River meant to him.
Well, actually, I have a long and varied history with the Stanislaus, starting with living the first 4 years of my life in the banks of the river down at the old mining camp of Melones. My father worked in the last stamp mill there, and I have some very fond memories of growing up there. Few memories, but very vivid memories that I have stuck in my brain. Playing in the sand by the bridge where everybody gathered to fish, and the backwaters of Melones coming up, and the motorboats, which I hated to hear the sounds of those motorboats even then, and walking up the streets of Old Melones to the Pindola Ranch to get produce about every other day with my mother. And the very last vivid memory I have is the old mill burning down, watching the bull pine torches flare up over the stamp mill, and all the townspeople huddled together watching the very end of their town. It was a very, very vivid memory and a frightening experience. And then after the war started in '42, we moved to Oakland, and we came back after the war, and I settled in Soulsbyville. And all through those years, Parrots Ferry was a favorite place of ours to swim. I learned to swim there when I was about 7 years old in the arms of my grandmother. And we learned to swim in the shallow waters. Then later, we learned to brave the rapids above Parrots Ferry and became proficient enough to swim across the highest river and the highest runoff. Every family in the area used to come to Parrots Ferry and teach their kids how to swim, and every generation would follow the same experience. I taught my son to swim, in later years, and it was just probably the most wonderful place in the county to have a family experience. And I met Mark Dubois there in the early 70s. And my family all thought that it was a foregone conclusion that the river was going to be lost. And that's just the way life was. That was progress. But Mark inspired me to the fact that maybe we could save the river through political action. And he introduced me to the upper river and all the beauty up there. About that time, I was doing my master's work at San Francisco State, and I was working on my master thesis, doing poetry and photography, and I thought I could just document Parrots Ferry. But with Mark's introduction to the upper river, I expanded it to the whole river system. And we fought a good battle, but it didn't work out in the end. But nevertheless, we have a lot of beautiful memories and pictures, and I have written some poetry about Parrots Ferry. So maybe I'll end this with just reading one poetry called Remembering Parrots Ferry.
Move a little to that way. That's good, so I can get in the picture. Thank you.
Remembering Parrots Ferry. We climbed, jumped the familiar shore upstream over giant speckled boulders as big as the energy that rolled them, then waded hot burning feet into icy water churning white under Paris Ferry Bridge. We glided bodies over slick rounded stones and dove into currents pulling deep under to see crystal water reveal riverbeds where a rainbow trout might glance an arm, a red willow fern may wave its color. We broke surface for breath above trophy caps, aimed toward rock islands shining sun to warm bellies and backs, allowed minds to wander on the river song, its cyclic metaphors of life, till again too hot, and hands knifed cold rapids between submerged giants, with legs kicking strong through rock channels to reach golden white mica sands.
Thank you for watching Viewpoint today. I want to thank Mr. Martin Blake, Mr. Ron Pickup, for taking us on a journey down the Stanislaus River as it was and what it became. Thanks for viewing. Goodbye.